Today's daf we're going to be learning is Bava Metzia daf Samachay. Today's daf is sponsored by Judy and Gerald Shapiro for the yurtzites of Arnold Shapiro, Gerald's father, Zichrono Livracha, and their grandson, Idan Shai, Zichrono Livracha. And in honor of the birth just before Pesach of their new granddaughter in Kiryat Tivon, Israel, whose name is Tohar Libi. Okay, we're going to get started with the case of, we're in the middle of this case of Rav Yosef Bar Chama, who Rava basically was, his son Rava was kind of throwing questions at some practice that Rav Yosef Bar Chama had. Interesting, today we're going to see all sorts of cases of rabbis doing things that perhaps maybe were okay, maybe weren't okay, or maybe verged on, is this okay or not? So we start with this case of Rav Yosef Bar Chama. What was he doing? There were people who owed him money who hadn't paid him back, and he took their slaves, seized their slaves, said, I'll use them, and I'll work them, and I won't take any money. I won't pay any money. And Rava said, what do you mean? You're stealing, right? It's not yours. You're basically using a slave, not paying the slave, to which Rav Yosef Bar Chama said, number one, I'm paying them because I'm giving them food. And slaves, like Rav Nachman said, slaves aren't worth the food they eat. And then Rava said, whoa. You're quoting Rav Nachman out of context. That's not what he meant. He was talking about Dari, the one who, dances, and he's kind of like not a very hardworking slave. He's not worth the food he eats, but everybody else is. So then Rabbi Yosef Bar Chama brings out another answer, which actually is a good answer. We basically said, I hold like the statement that was quoted in the name of Rav, that if you're not working your slave's not working for the day, I can take your slave and use it because without paying you. Because, as we said, I'm benefiting and you're not losing anything because you're not losing, I'm actually benefiting you by doing it, because otherwise your slave would become a lazy bum, and I'm helping your slave learn that, they need to work every day. So he says that's why this isn't considered theft. But here comes the big response of Rava, which is why this sugya is quoted, right? Those other first two claims is why the sugya was quoted in Bava Kama. But now we're going to see why it's quoted in our chapter in Bava Metzia. Amarle, first line, end of the first line on Samachay. Works if they don't owe you any money. But right? They're not losing out, so you can benefit. Okay? And without having to pay them. But that only works if you're not someone who they owe money to. If you're a malve, you're a lender of money to these people. Of course you can't do that because it looks like it has a semblance of interest. And how do I know this? Because he quotes, Amar Rav Yosef Bar Yomi, Amar Rav Nachman, right? It's actually funny because first Rav Yosef Bar Chama quoted Rav Nachman to support his practice. And now Rava pulls out a different statement of Rav Nachman and says, even though if you're a squatter and you live in a place where nobody's renting it out and they're not losing any money by it, you don't have to pay rent. But if you loan them money and then you live in their property without paying them, that's a problem because it looks like rebate. Because you're gaining, right? You're gaining some benefit from that person, and that would be a problem. To which Rav Yosef Bar Chama says, Amarle, very strong statement, Hadribi, I'm going to change my practice. It's very strong because here you have a son who was able to convince his father that what he was doing was not appropriate, and he stops his practice. Amar Abai, we're now going to have three cases. Two of them, Rabbi and Rav, are going to disagree about. This is a different topic now. If you remember, we learned that Rabbi Elazar says that if you take money for interest, you have to return it. The court can enforce you returning that interest that you took. So according to Rabbi Elazar, who says that you have to return the interest that you took, again, this is if it's ribik tzutza. Remember, what does that mean, ribik tzutza? You distinguish between avak ribit and ribik tzutza, or ribit mukdemet, ribit mucheret, but Torah law ribit, which is we agreed at the beginning that I was going to loan you money and you were going to pay me X for interest. In that case, when I collect X, I have to return X. What if we're now talking about cases where I collected rebate, but a little bit differently than what we agreed upon? Do I have to return what we agreed upon, or do I have to return what I actually collected? And we're going to have three different cases and see what the law is in each of them. The first two, as I said, we're going to have a machloket Abai and Rav. Amar Abai, Haiman de masik zuze deribta b'chavre. You owe me rebate. Now we're talking here only about the return of the interest, not the return of the whole loan. Okay, the return of the whole loan, we're not discussing. We're just discussing the amount of rebate that you gave me. So you owe me rebate, interest, and the price of wheat that we agreed on wheat for interest, and the price of wheat for interest of the price of wheat in the shuk is 4 se'ah for a zuz. So you owe me, let's say, a zuz worth of grain. Instead of giving me 4 se'ah for rebate for the interest, you give me yav le'iu chamisha. You give me 5 se'ah. You throw in extra. So while you're returning the interest payment, which was 4 se'ah, you throw in 5 se'ah. So now the question is, now the agreement was you were going to give me 4 se'ah for a zuz, and you gave me 5 se'ah for the zuz that you owed me. So now when we say, hey, Michelle, you collected interest, you have to return it. Do I have to return what we agreed upon? Or do I have to return what you actually gave me? When we take it away from you, comes the buyer and he says, the 4. I only have to do the 4. Why? Because the 4 was given on interest. And the other was like you gave me a discount. It's not exactly a discount. It's not a sale. But you just threw in some extra. But that's not, you kind of lower the price of it. But when you really, it wasn't part of the interest, really. Rava says, Amar, what are you talking about? You gave me 5 for interest. When you gave it to me as interest payment. You didn't say, oh, here's 4 for interest. I'll throw in an extra one just to, lower the price or kind of, add something extra as a gift. You gave me the whole thing as an interest payment. So of course I have to give back the entire thing, even though that wasn't what we agreed upon, but you have to give back the whole thing. Second case. Amar Abai, ve'amar Abai. You owe me 4 zuzim. Instead of giving me 4 zuzim, here you're not changing the value. There you gave more. Here you're giving the same amount, but not in money. You're giving it in a glima, in a cloak. So you give me a cloak worth 4 zuzim. So you give me the exact same amount, but not in the form of money. Right? We agreed it would be money, and you gave me something else, which is fine. The question is, when they collect the interest from me, when the court says, hey, Michelle, you collected this for interest, this cloak, you have to give it back. The question is, do I have to give back the cloak, or do I have to give back the 4 zuzim that we agreed upon? So again, the difference is, in the first case, it was a different amount. Here, it's the same amount, but in a different form. Abai says, very much like he said in the previous one, you have to give back exactly what you committed to. You committed to 4, I have to give back 4. You committed to 4 and not a glima, I have to give back 4 zuzim, even though I took a glima, and the glima stays with me. Rabba Amar is going to obviously disagree. Glima mafkina mine, we make you give back the glima. We make me give back the glima. Why? For a different reason entirely. My timer. We don't want people on the street saying, oh, look, Michelle's wearing that cloak that she collected with the rebate money. So, right, she collected that with interest. People will know that, and we don't want that to happen. So therefore, I have to return you the object that I collected so that people don't go around saying, oh, look, she's wearing the garment she collected with her rebate, as interest. Okay, next. Amar Rava. This one there's no machloket about. Rava, we don't hear what Abai says anyway. Amar Rava, Haiman demasik tresar zuze derib to b'chavre. You owe me 12 zuzim of interest. Ve'ogra le chatzer demitagra ba'asara. Ve'ogra niyale b'tresar. This is an interesting case. You have a courtyard that generally rents out for 10 zuzim for the year. So you say, okay, instead of giving you interest directly, the 10 zuzim, I'm just going to give you my house. Oh, sorry, the 12 zuzim. I'm just going to give you my house for the year. You can live in it for free. And in that way, I'll return you the interest. Now, your house generally rents out for 10. So you're actually giving me less than I'm really deserving of. Right? I'm deserving of 12. You give me 10. But we make an agreement between us that that's fine for me. I will consider that I collected the entire amount of interest, I'm willing to agree to this. Okay, I'm agreeing to this arrangement. It's fine with me. Okay, maybe I wasn't sure I was going to get anything and I'm happy to get 10. So I basically say, and we make an agreement that we're going to view the rental of this house for the year, even though it's normally worth 10, we're going to view it as worth 12. And then we agree on that. And I live in the house for the year. So it's valued at 10, but we decided it was valued at 12. So now comes the obvious question. Ki mafkina mine, when the court comes to collect the money back from me, because I lived there for a year, and now I have to give back the interest because I collected it. I wasn't allowed to collect the interest. I have to return the money. Do I have to return the actual value of what I got, which was 10, which would seem fair because it really wasn't worth 12? Or do I have to return 12 because we made an agreement that it was worth 12? So comes Rav and he says 12. So now Amarle Rav Achami Difta le Ravina, because 12 is what the interest was and 12 is what you have to return. So Rav Achami Difti says to Ravina, I don't understand though. Me as the Malva, I could claim, listen, ki agrahachi davakamistar sheli. Why did I make this arrangement of 12? Because it wasn't like there was any money taken out of my pocket, right? In fact, I was getting money. I was just getting a little less than I was supposed to, but the whole interest anyway was an extra payment. It wasn't like I was really deserving of getting it. It was all like extra money coming to me. So I was willing to take a little bit less, 10 out of the 12. But now you're going to make me pay out of pocket. Hashta to lomishtar shili kida arga kule amahu da argarn. Now that you're going to make me, right? Now I have to take money out of my pocket. You're going to make me pay more than the actual value of what I got? That seems unfair. We should do it based on the rate of what it goes by in general. To which Rava explains, no. Well, it wasn't Rava because someone else asked this question about Rava to Ravina. Ravina answers him, Mishum da Amrle Savar V'Kiba. No. An agreement is an agreement. I made an agreement to accept the land as worth 12 instead of 10. That's what I agreed to it. So because I agreed to it, that's the way it is. And therefore, I would have to pay the 12. Okay, so what we basically did was we finished up, summary until now, we finished up the case of Rav Chama and why in the end what he was doing was interest, and he basically stops his practice. And then we talked about these 3 cases where the interest taken was different than originally agreed upon. And when the Malva needs to return it, do they need to return it? And we had 3 different cases with 3 different issues, really. Do they need to return it exactly as agreed upon or exactly as was really taken? New Mishna. Marbim al hasachal ve'em marbim al hamecher. We're now going to make a differentiation between rent and renting of a house and purchasing of a house. And what we're talking about here is discounting items, and this goes on all the time, where you go to a store and they tell you, if you pay up front, it will cost you X. If you pay in payments or, in a year from now, then it will cost you X plus 5. Okay? You're basically going to pay more for keeping your money for longer. That's kind of like interest. And now we're going to distinguish between rental and buying. Okay, if you're interested in history, so in Flashback this week, actually wrote about, it went up already, and I'll send out the link after class today, all about rental and the rental market, and specifically talking about Jerusalem in the 1900s and issues there was with rentals and people not affording land. And anyway, a bit of a perspective of history, not from the time of the Gemara, but relating a bit to our sugya. So now we have this case. Marbin ala sachar ve'em marbin ala mecher. You can have someone pay more money for delaying payment when it comes to rentals, but not when it comes to a sale. Ketzad, how does this work? Hiskirlo et chatzero. I rent you my courtyard. Va'amarlo, and I say to you, if you're going to give me the money right now, I'll give it to you for 10 slaim for a year. But if you'll pay me at the end of every month, I'll charge you a sela for each month. Obviously, that comes out to 12 slaim. So you're going to pay more for doing it over the course of a year. Mutar, you can do this. Macharlo et sadeo, but if you sold the field, va'amarlo, we don't yet know why there's a difference. Have no fear, we'll get to it in the Gemara. The Mishna is just spelling out the case, not explaining why. Va'amarlo, if you give me all the money up front, I'll sell you the property for 1,000 zuzim. Ve'im lagorem, but if you give me the money later in the season when we do the threshing, bishneim asarmana, I'll give it to you for 12,000, for 1,200, 1,200 zuzim, asur. That you can't do. So the Gemara asks immediately, Mishna Resha, Mishna Seifa, what's the difference between the beginning case, the schirut, the rental, and what's the difference between the sale? Rabba Rabbi Yosef to Amrit Rabbayu. Okay, well, we really need to start it off is with the sale is a problem for the basic reason that it's called agarnatar in Aramaic, schal hamtanat mo. We're going to keep reviewing this, which is you're benefiting from keeping your money for longer. And as a result of that, you're willing to pay me more. So I'm getting rewarded for the fact that I gave you money. That is like a loan. So that's a problem. The question is, why is schirut okay? So Rabba and Rabbi Yosef to Amrit Travayu, Rabba and Rabbi Yosef both explain the issue with schirut. And we've seen this before a number of times. Schirut einam shtalemet ela basof. There's actually a debate about this. When you rent something, it's as if the obligation to pay kicks in immediately from the first moment till, and every moment you're using it, basically you're obligated to pay. Or do we look at the arrangement of schirut differently? Schirut is, I owe the money only at the end. And that's what Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef say. But this Mishna is based upon this logic. The obligation to pay for something you rent only kicks in at the end of the period of time that you rented it for, which means that there's no schal hamtanat ma'ot. There's no benefit for the fact that I pushed off payment because I didn't push off payment. The payment date comes really at the end of, let's say, each month or the end of the year. That's when you're really obligated to pay. So let's read it inside. If schirut einam shtalemet ela basof, the high kevan delomati zimne lemigbe. Since it wasn't yet time for me to collect the money, I tell you, I'll give you an early discount, an early bird discount, but you really don't have to pay the money at the early bird discount price time. So, lav agarnatrale, you're not benefiting from the fact that I'm pushing off payment because the payment is only due at the very end. And if I decide at that point I'm going to set the price, right? Mishvu dechashavia, it's just that I'm setting a different price at that point. I'm saying, oh, you know what? The price is high now. And I set a price. I as the seller, I'm allowed to set a price, obviously within the range of ona'ah and all that. But I'm allowed to set a price. And I said right now, the price is higher. Okay, I'm allowed to do that because the price is set at that moment. It's not like the price was set earlier and there's all that time where I'd let you have your money that you didn't pay it, because that's not the case here. Whereas in a sale, right, or let's keep reading for a minute. But we're still explaining the schirut. The Gemara goes into more detail. The fact that I discounted it earlier is I'm just giving you like an early bird special, but you're not really obligated to pay right now. I'm just motivating you to give me the money. But the real obligation only kicks in at the end of the year. And therefore, I can basically charge you money later, charge you more for it, because there's no benefit that you got to keep the money for long because you actually didn't owe me the money at all until now. Seifa, but when it comes to a sale, it's a sale. Now, how does a sale work? Buy the mishkal to me me'achshav. When I sell you something, you're supposed to pay me right then and there. If I push off payment, then that's a different story. Then, right, hilkach agarnatar lehu v'asul. Then I'm pushing off payment. You're benefiting by getting to keep your money for longer. And on account of that, you're giving me more money. That's obviously rebate. Rava says the rabbis looked into this and they actually found a pasuk in the Torah that we could connect this to. They didn't really learn it from here, but it's like a cute way to remember this. It says kisachir shana b'shana. This has to do with slaves, and they work for you like an eved ivri. They're like a sachir that works from year to year. And why does it say shana b'shana? Sounds like 1 year in another year. So they say, schirut shel shana zo, it's talking about a sachir. So schirut, a rental arrangement, even though here they're talking about paying a person for the job they do, but it's all the same kind of idea about you're renting the use of the person. So his sachir shana b'shana, it's saying the schirut of this year is paid next year. Why is it paid next year? Because you wait till the end of the year, then you really only owe it at the end of the year, which would basically be the beginning of the upcoming year. So that's where they get this, at least allusion to it in the pasuk. Now we're going to go back to this case of the mecher. Im legorim b'shneim asar mana asur. And if you're saying, how do we do this then? Right? It seems, right, we do this all the time. Well, the rabbis also were struggling with this, and the rabbis we're going to have 3 rabbis they're all wealthy rabbis, because we're talking about people who have money and are basically loaning out or letting people pay for things later. These people each try to justify their actions and say, the way I do this, it's okay. We're going to see, are they right or not? And the Gemara doesn't really tell you too much information. You have to rely on the commentaries. So we'll start. I'm Rav Nachman. Tarsha Shari. Okay, what's Tarsha? Doesn't really tell you. Tarsha is you raise the price basically for paying later. You say, pay now, I'll take this amount. If you pay later, I'll charge you more, which sounds just like our Mishna. But he says it's permitted to do it like this. So, Eitiv Rabbi Chama Rav Nachman. Rabbi Chama says to Rav Nachman, if you might remember, Rav Nachman married to Yalta, who's the daughter of the Reish Galuta, and he was part of the Exilarch's family, which may or may not be relevant here, but it definitely puts him in the wealthier of the people. So Rabbi Chama says to him, Rav Chama says to him, the Rav Nachman, but the Mishna says if you're selling something and you raise the price for giving the money later, it's forbidden. So how on earth are you doing this? In the Mishnah, you basically said, I'm selling you this now for 10, overtime for 12. You gave a set amount. That is like Ribik Tzutza, because you're setting the amount you're going to get already from the outset. I don't say what I'm going to charge them later. I just say you'll have to pay more. Because I don't specify an amount, that's okay. So somehow that seems to be not such an issue. Because remember, this is all rabbinic as it is. Only Ribik Tzutza when it's a loan. This is not a loan. This is a sale. So already, once it's a sale, we can be more lenient. So we say, well, if it's not like Ribik Tzutza where you set the amount from the beginning, I'm loaning you $100 and you'll pay me back $120. You're not doing that. So if you're not setting the amount, right, it's not at all like that because number one, it's a sale. Number two, there's no set amount. You don't say how much more. So that's okay. And it seems like that's fine. But Rav Papa is going to have a bit more of an issue with his attempt to try to justify his actions. I'm a Rav Papa. Tarsha Didi Shari, the way I lower the prices is permitted. How so? My timer. He was a brewer, a beer brewer. He says, number one, Shechrai lo pasuk. He wants to basically claim, what is interest? Interest is the malveh, the loan, the one loaning the money, and here it's going to be the seller, is gaining benefit. What does he claim? I'm not gaining any benefit. Why am I not gaining benefit? I'm selling you the beer up front. Well, one benefit could be, right, and I'm only taking the money later. One benefit could be, well, why am I gaining? Because if I didn't sell it to you now, my beer might spoil. But he says, my beer's not going to spoil. I know how to keep beer. I know how to keep it from spoiling. I'm not in any hurry to sell this beer. As opposed to, let's say, if you had grains, the grains might go bad over a course of time. Or let's say fresh fruits, they'll really spoil. So it's in your interest to get it sold right now, even if you don't get the money. He says, I don't have any interest like that. It doesn't help me that you're buying it now. Number two, mezuzah lo tzrichna. I don't even need your money. Like, I don't care that you're giving me extra money. I'm wealthy. I don't need your money. And all the benefits are for the buyer. I'm just making your life better. You want your beer now, and you don't want to pay now because you don't have money. It's all to benefit you. It's not benefiting me at all. Now, this is a little bit strange because theoretically, any person who lends money on interest could claim this, right? They could say, I'm lending you money. You need the money. You're the one more desperate than me. It's all for your benefit. So this is his claim, to which Rav Idi says to him, I don't understand. Why are you viewing yourself as the center here and viewing it all through your eyes if you're not benefiting? Interest isn't all about the malva benefiting. What is interest? Zil batar ditu. Look from the perspective of the lokach, of the buyer. If the buyer had money, they would have bought it right now. They would have given you the money right now. But they don't have money. And basically, they're benefiting. They're basically answering. This is exactly interest. Because what's the story here? Why is this exactly like a loan on interest? Because you're giving them the beer right now, and they only have to pay you over time. And when they pay you, they're going to pay you more. So they're benefiting from having the benefit of the money, and you're not returning the money until later. right? I'm sorry, you're not getting the money till later. And when you do get the money, you're getting a higher price. Okay, thank you for reminding me. I see someone wrote in the chat. I forgot to mention, Alana Stein-Hain Shiur came out yesterday, Din and Daf, all about why the lovet actually is doing something wrong in this action. And this would connect with that idea of the topic of Alana's Shiur, right? We understand why the Malva Malva shouldn't take interest, but why is the lovet responsible and is over on a low taseh, as we've seen, for paying money on interest. I'm a Rav Chama. Tarsha did, so basically we had Rav Nachman who said Tarsha is permitted, and we said, you're right. In your way that you do it, it's okay because you don't set a price. We have Rav Papa who tried to justify and say, I'm not benefiting, so it's okay. To which we said, well, the lov is getting a benefit and paying for it, and that in and of itself is forbidden. And Rav Chama is now going to say, Tarsha didi vadai shari. Okay, we had Tarsha shari, then we had Rav Papa who said, my kind of Tarsha is permitted, and he was wrong. Comes Rav Chama says, my Tarsha is definitely permitted. Let's see what he does. Okay, now they don't even tell you, but the commentaries explain, and this is a case we're going to see later on also in the chapter. And I'll use the example of there's a different market price for different items in different places. So let's start with, we'll take Vietnam as an example because all these things made in Vietnam, right? They're very cheap in Vietnam, but when they're sold in New York, let's say, they cost a lot more money, right? You can take the same shirt in Vietnam, you could buy it really cheap. And when they send it to New York, right? In New York, they're going to sell that shirt for a lot of money. So we have Rav Chama who's living in a place like Vietnam where the prices are low. And what he does is there's all these merchants who want to take his stuff. They want to buy it so they can sell it in New York. But instead of buying it for the price, and as Rav Chama doesn't want to sell it for the price he could sell it for in his hometown in Vietnam because he's not going to get a lot of money for it. So what does he do? He sells it to these merchants for a high price, for the price they could get for it in New York. And they say, no problem. We'll give you the price we could get for it in New York, but when we get back from our trip, okay, we're going to go to New York. We're going to take it on credit. We're not going to pay you yet. We're going to go to New York. We're going to sell it there for the high price. We're going to, in the meantime, use the money we got from the sale, buy more things, sell, buy, sell, buy, sell. That's their interest. Their interest is we want to use the money, basically. So what we'll do is, right, we won't take money from you. We'll take your produce or your items, your clothes, let's say. We'll sell them in New York for a high price. We'll give it back to you after a few months when we get back, after we've made some more money for ourselves on the deal, and then we'll give you back the money that, you know, the high price. Now, again, what's he getting? He's getting more for his money because where he is, it's actually not worth what he's going to get for it. So because it's worth something somewhere else that's higher, he's not living there though. So he's actually somewhat getting interest. So why is this okay? The reason is because in this situation, he assumes responsibility for the objects. And this is when we're going to see this case later on in Daf, I think it's Ayin Gimel maybe, Ayin Bet Ayin Gimel. If the seller assumes responsibility, the original seller, then it's not viewed as basically buying on credit. It's viewed more like they're his messengers. And they're basically taking his items, selling them in New York and bringing back the money. So that's a different relationship. That's not interest because it's still his. What the whole problem of interest is if he sells it and it becomes theirs and they only pay the money later, that's a problem. If they're just taking his items, selling them, and then returning the money they got, that's just a messenger. I'm sending you to sell my stuff and bring me the money that you got. So that's a whole different arrangement, and that works. So that's why this whole thing works. Again, you don't really see this in the 4 words, Tarsha Didi Vadai Shari, but that's how they explain the case. And now they say, my time, but why does this work? Now, they're not exactly answering why does it work, because why does it work is because he assumes achrayut. He assumes responsibility, okay? But now they're going to add something else, which is there's another issue here that we can resolve. Nichale, not only that, but it's actually in the buyers are actually benefiting from this. Nichale delay kubirashute. It's actually good for them that it's still considered his. Why is it good for them that it's still considered his? This is a separate thing. To call hecha de kaazle shavkelu michsa unaketlu shuka. Well, Rav Chama, and this is also, he was part of the Exilarchs family as well, or the Exilarchs group of rabbis that were part of the Exilarchs inner circle. Perhaps because of that, some commentaries say, some people say it's because he was a Talmid Chacham, just a Torah scholar. Torah scholars have benefits, right? Like there's clergy benefits. So Torah scholars have benefits also, which were that when they brought these items that were Rav Chama, they said, oh, by the way, we have Rav Chama's stuff. We're selling Rav Chama's stuff. And that opened doors for them. What did it mean? It meant they didn't have to pay these, export or import taxes. They didn't have to, they would buy Rav Chama's stuff first in the shuk. So it was a huge benefit to them to basically say this was Rav Chama's. And so the question is, what issue does this resolve? That's a bit of a question because already once Rav Chama takes responsibility, we don't really need this. So the commentaries differ on what exactly the issue is there and what this is resolving, but we'll leave it as a bit of a question here. And now the Gemara turning now to Amabet, we now have a summary of not only this section, but some previous sections we discussed before, like paskening and a bunch of machlokot we saw. Number one, Hilchataka Rav Chama. Rav Chama is right that this is a good way you could do business. It's fine. It's legit. It's not a problem of interest. Number two, Hilchataka Rabbi Elazar, who said, Ribik tzutza yotza b'dayanim. The dayanim can enforce collection of the ribik. And Hilchataka Rabbi Yanai, Da'amar Malihe Mali Demand. That was in the whole first Mishna, in that complicated case that we said in the end, right, when you turn this loan, basically you move it onto wheat, and then you move it onto oil, and you move it onto wine and all that. In the end, you commit to this rate of what the wine's going to be. But if you want in the end to give back money, you can even give back money and it's not viewed as interest. Okay, and that we hold like him as well. Now we're going to a new Mishnah. I sell you a field and I only paid part. Nowadays, how would this work? If I sell you a field or I sell you a house, it's more likely. I sell you a house and you put down a down payment, right? When does the house become yours? Only once you pay in full. So that's what it seems to be talking about here as well. I pay, right? You pay, I sold you the house. You paid me part of the money. Let's say you gave a down payment. V'amarlo, and I said to you, whenever you want, bring the money. Not like nowadays where we'd say, okay, you have to pay the money by X day. And then it'll be yours. Asur, you can't do this. Now the assumption is, why can't you do this? Because this is going to create problems. Why is it going to create problems? Well, if I sell it to you and I say, okay, you put down a down payment, and later, let's say that's in January. In March, you pay in full. But it was as if it was yours from the beginning. And we're going to talk about different languages that you can use. Right now, they're going to say, it's as if I'm selling it to you today, but it'll only be yours in the event that you give me the money. Now, it's unclear whether you're going to give me the money or not. Maybe you won't come up with the rest of the funds. And then the land will be mine. So right now, we're going to have a problem. Because if I eat the produce of the land, still, it might not be mine. Because if you pay me in full in March, then it turns out from January, it was yours. So that's going to be a problem, right? Nowadays, it wouldn't be yours until you finally pay all the money, right? And it would be fine. And then we're going to talk about that when we get to the Gemara. Okay, now we get a totally different case. Hilveu al sadeu. I loaned you money and you gave me your field as collateral. Now the field is worth a lot more than the loan, but you just gave it to me on collateral. Va'amarlo, but I said to you, listen, I'm worried you're not going to pay. So I'm going to make the following stipulation. If you don't pay me in 3 years, this loan in full, this field that you're giving me, the entire field will be mine, even though it's way more than the loan. It will be mine. This is a fair and square deal. This is what Baitus ben Zunin, who was a wealthy man, he would do this. He would loan money, maybe that's how he became wealthy, I don't know. But he would take money. He would take collateral and he would say, if you don't pay me, I'm keeping the collateral after 3 years. How this can work, we're going to get to a big discussion. This is going to start from the beginning of tomorrow's daf about exaggerated claims, and it's a topic called asmachta that we've seen in different times before. Excuse me for a minute. And when you make an exaggerated commitment, often you don't really mean it. And you just agreed to it because you just figure, for sure, I'll pay the money. You don't really mean to give me your field because your field is worth way more. How can this exactly work? That's going to be tomorrow's daf, all about asmachta. Okay, now we're back to case number 1. The Gemara says, Mi ochel perot. Who eats the produce? Now, it's a bit of a weird question because the Mishna said you can't do it in this way, right? You can't sell your field and say, when you give me the money, right, whenever you want, take it, give me the money and then you'll have it. So we don't really understand this question, but we'll explain it in a minute. Who eats the produce in the meantime, between the date that you paid your first down payment until the time you paid in full? Rav Huna Amar Mocher Ochel Perot. I can still eat the fruits because it's not yours yet, which again, as we described in the Mishnah, it doesn't really make sense, so hold off for a minute. Rav Anan Amar, which would fit well with the Mishnah, even though the Mishnah said you really can't do it, but Mishalshina Tapero. A shalish is from the word shalosh, a third party. You give it to a third party because we don't know. If you'll pay the money, it turns out the produce was yours because the field was yours from the beginning. If you don't pay the money, then it turns out it was mine because it was never yours because you never really bought it. So then I would get the produce. So we leave it in a third party. When in the event, eventually, either you pay or you don't pay, then we'll give the money to the produce to who it goes to. Velo pligi. And in fact, Rav Anan and Rav Huna don't disagree. They're each just talking about different cases. Hada amar lechi maitit kane. Hada amar lechi maitit kne me'achshav. If it all depends on what the arrangement was. If I say, when you bring the money, then it will be yours, that's Rav Huna. Then the mocher can eat the payroll. That's like we do a deal now. You give me a down payment. No one ever thought the land was yours now, and that when you pay down the road, it was yours from now. No, it's yours from the day you pay in full. So if it's yours from the day you pay in full, that means until that point, I can eat the payroll. It's all my field still. So that's Rav Huna. And Rav Anan was talking about the case the way we described the Mishnah, which is l'chimaitit k'ni me'achshav. When you give me the money later, retroactively, the land will be yours from today, from when we first made the arrangement. And then it's a problem for the mocher to eat the payroll. It's also a problem for the lokech to eat the payroll. The seller can't, the buyer can't, because we don't know what's going to happen in the end, whether it will be the sellers or it will be the buyers. And since we did this deal in January, even though you didn't pay me till March, well, it's going to be retroactively starting from January. So from January, neither of us can eat the fruits. Tani Rav Safra beribi to be Rabbi Chia. Rav Safra was learning the braita from the house of Rabbi Chia, from the school of Rabbi Chia. And here he had a braita that read like this. And then Rav is going to explain the details. We're going to have one of these classic Mishnayot of 4 different permutations. Pa'amim sheshnehem mutarim. There's cases where both can eat the payroll. Pa'amim sheshnehem asurim. Sometimes neither one can eat the payroll. Pa'amim shamocher mutar v'lokeach asur. Pa'amim shalokeach mutar v'mocher asur. Okay, we have times where the buyer can and the seller can't, and we have times where the seller can, where the seller can't and the buyer can. Okay, so here we go. Ani Rava Batri. Rava explained. So he basically learned this braita, and then Rava said, I'm going to explain to you what each of the cases are. When can both of them eat the payroll? That wasn't a case we saw yet. If I tell you, when you give a down payment, I say, now that you gave a down payment, you gave 10% of the land, 10% of the land will be yours. So from now, and as you pay, you will acquire accordingly. So if that's the case, you can eat the produce of the part that you purchased, the 10%, and I can eat produce on 90%. That would be a case where both of us can eat the produce. That we already learned. That was the Mishnah. If I tell you when you eventually pay in full, it will be yours from right now. Well, then we don't know who's going to be eventually, so no one can eat the produce. That was Rav Huna. The mocher can eat, the lokech can't. What would that be? When you give me the money, then it will be yours. So until the point you give me the money in full, even though you pay partial, it's not yours yet. So therefore, I can eat the payroll because it's still mine. Pa'amim, this one we didn't learn yet. Halokech mutar u'mocher asur. The buyer can eat the produce, but I can't. What would that be? Ta'amar le k'nei me'achshav. You give me a down payment. I say, okay, the house is yours. What about the fact that you owe me all this money? I'll view the money you owe me as a loan. I'm basically giving you the property in full. And the rest of it is like a loan. Give it to me when you feel like it. So then, obviously, the land is yours from right now. And therefore, you can eat it in full, and I can't eat it at all. Now we're going to do our last topic for today, which connects to this, is a comment that Rav Huna bered Rav Yehoshua makes about this braita. I'm Rav Huna bered Rav Yehoshua. Sorry, I skipped a few words. Man tana shnehem asalim. Who does this braita go like when it says that both can't eat? In the case where we don't know what's going to happen, are you going to actually buy it in full, or are you going to not find the money and it's going to go back to being mine? And then I can't eat the payroll because maybe it'll be like rebeat, because in the end, if I get the money in full, and it turns out it was yours, and I ate the produce, and I ate your produce, and then I got more for letting you pay the money later, and that will be interest. So who says that that's forbidden because of interest? Rav Huna b'reid Rabbi Yehoshua deloke Rabbi Yehuda. This doesn't match. Instead of saying who it is like, it's saying who it's not like, which basically means it's like the rabbis. It's not like Rabbi Yehuda, because remember Rabbi Yehuda? To eat Rabbi Yehuda ha'ama tzad echad beribit mutar. Rabbi Yehuda said that when it's not clear there's going to be ribit, which is not clear, because if you end up paying in full and I eat payroll, it'll be ribit. But if you don't end up paying, which we don't know if you're going to end up paying or not, we have no idea if you'll find the money to buy the house. So to buy the field. So in that case, it'll be fine that I ate the payroll because it was mine all along. So therefore, tzad echad b'ribit is going to be, right, forbidden here. And Rabbi Yehuda says it's permitted. What we're going to do now is continue in this line and quote two more braitot, or perhaps some people think this is actually a continuation of the same braita. Unclear, doesn't really matter for our purposes. But we're going to see two more. The reason why people think that this is a continuation is a stylistic thing. These braitot are not introduced. Usually there's a word that says Tanya, here's a braita, Tanu Rabbanan, some sort of intro term. Because it doesn't give an intro term, some people think it's just a continuation of the previous braita. Either which way, we're going to basically say that these next two, whether they're lines from this braita or a different braita, also don't correspond to Rabbi Yehuda. Mishken lo bayit, mishken lo sadeh. If I gave you a loan and you gave me land for a field for collateral, va'amar lo, it's a totally different case. And I say to you, as the borrower, as the lender, the malveh, by the way, if you ever think to sell this land, now you can already see this is going to be tzad echad b'ribit because we don't know if you'll sell the land or not. If you ever decide to sell this property that you gave me right now for collateral, lo timkerem elali, don't sell them, meaning only sell it to me, bidamim halalu, for this and this price, presumably we're saying for a very cheap price. In other words, I'm basically a little bit, right, taking advantage of my position as the lender, and I say, listen, very nice, you're giving me this collateral. You commit to me right now that if you sell this land, you're going to sell it to me for a cheap price. Assume that is forbidden because that's ribit, because I'm gaining a benefit by a cheap price for this land, even though, right, it's tzad echad b'ribit because we don't know if you're ever going to decide to sell that land. Bishovehen mutar. If I say, commit to me, you'll sell it to me, but for its actual price, well, then it's not ribit. That's different because I'm not getting any financial benefit. I'm just getting the rights to buy it, but that's not a direct financial benefit. Mantana b'damim halalu asur, but that second part doesn't interest us. The first part is what interests us. Who's the Tana who says, if you say for this and this amount of money, which is a lower amount of money, it's forbidden. Rav Huna b'reid Rabbi Yehoshua deloke Rabbi Yehuda. Again, same person. Rav Huna b'reid Rabbi Yehoshua says this is not like Rabbi Yehuda. To eat Rabbi Yehuda ha'amar tzad echad b'ribit mutar. He would think this is permitted because it's not clear there's going to be interest here because you may never decide to sell it, and then there'll be no interest because I'll have no gain. Machar lo bayit, machar lo sadeh. Third case. You sell me a house, you sell me a field. Va'amar lo. Now, this has nothing to do with a loan. This is, okay, now, you sell me a field. Why? Because you're desperate for money. Okay? You have no money, you have to sell your house. So when you sell it to me, you say the following. But as soon as I get money, commit that you will return it to me. Okay? Because I'm just strapped for cash. As soon as I get the cash, commit to me, you'll give it back to me. Asur. You can't do this. Okay? Because, right, what's the reason this is forbidden? Because what's the problem? You're basically saying this is a sale on condition. You're selling it to me only if you don't get the money back, right? If you get the money back, you're going to take it back. So if I now eat the produce in that field, it might, in the end, retroactively go back to being your field, and then it turns out I was eating fruits from your field. So that's a problem. And again, for the benefit of you not giving me the money till later, right? There's again, hamtana ma'ot. You're giving me the money later to buy back the house, and then it reverts back to being yours, and I've, in the meantime, gotten payroll. So that's interest. But if I say to you, if you get, I'm being a nice guy, you have no money, so you sell your house. And I say, listen, I know it's hard for you. I understand. When you get the money, I'll give you the house back. That is permitted, mutar. So let's put that case aside. We don't really know yet why it's permitted. But in the meantime, what do they want to tell us? Again, that's tzad echad b'ribit. Montana, who's the author of this braita? I'm Rav Huna Rabbi Yehoshua, Delo ke Rabbi Yehuda. Again, why is it not like Rabbi Yehuda? Di Rabbi Yehuda. Hamar tzadach habri mutar. Obviously, why is it tzadach habri? Because maybe you'll get the money, maybe you won't get the money. If you get the money, then it reverts back to being yours from the beginning. It was never really a good sale. It's as if we canceled the sale. Then what am I doing eating the produce? That would be rebate. If you never get the money, then it'll be mine forever. And then there's no rebate. So Rabbi Yehuda wouldn't agree with this. Mishna reisha, Mishna seifa, last line for today. So what's the difference between the two cases? Seifa de amrle midate. The second case is where the buyer said, listen, I'll be a nice guy. Maybe. I didn't commit. I didn't say for sure I'm going to be a nice guy. I said, if I'm in the mood that day, if I want, I'll sell it back to you. Okay. Now, why does this help? Well, because what I'm saying really is, and Rashi points this out, is that it's kind of like a new sale. What I'm basically saying is, yes, I bought your land right now. You needed the money. I bought the land. That sale is final. And I'm not committing that I'll give it back to you for sure, which is what you tried to get me to commit in the first part. And that's why part of the deal, it was as if saying, we're going to undo this deal if I get the money, if you get the money. But in this case, I'm basically saying, okay, I bought your land. Maybe in 2 years when you get the money, I'll sell it back to you if I feel like it. But that'll be a separate sale then. And then I can eat payroll all this time because it's mine fair and square. And when I sell it back to you, it'll be yours fair and square, but from 2 years from now, not from now. So that works because that's not rebate. Okay, quick summary of our daf. And as I told you, tomorrow it's going to be all about asmachta and these kind of exaggerated or did you really mean this kind of thing? And then maybe it's not really a valid agreement. We'll get to all that tomorrow. But what did we do today? We finished up with Rav Chama, and Rava basically convinces his father that he's doing something that seems like interest. We then had 3 cases where you return interest, but different than exactly the way the interest was discussed originally. And, do you have to, when the court comes and makes you return it, how exactly do you have to return it? Then we had the difference between a sale and a rental and why there's lowering the price in a rental is okay because the Shiur agreeing to really kicks in the obligation to pay only at the end. Whereas in a sale, it doesn't work because it really kicks in the beginning. And then you really are charging people more for getting to keep their money for longer. And then we had these 3 rabbis who tried to explain their practices, their business practices, and justify why it's not really rebate, that they're basically charging people more money in certain cases or for having them right for being able to keep their money for longer. And 2 were successful, 1 was not so successful. Then we had this case, and we talked really in the end about 4 different cases of how you can sell land in a way where you give a partial payment, not the full payment, and then who gets to eat the payroll depending on how the arrangement went and what exactly it was. And then we had the braita, which then Rava explained the 4 kind of permutations of that. And then from there, we got to, well, the braita doesn't match Rabbi Yehuda. And from there, we got to 3 cases where the braita doesn't match Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. With that, we'll finish for today. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom.